What would you do if you were a lone prospector, haunted by a past you couldn't outrun, and you found yourself face to face with an Apache woman whose piercing gaze saw straight through your defenses, asking a question that cut to the very core of your being? This is the true story, or as true as any legend whispered around a flickering campfire, of Jedediah Stone and the Apache woman known as Ayanna. It unfolded in the rugged, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory, specifically near the Dragoon Mountains, in the late summer of 1878. It was, by all accounts, one of the most remarkable and dangerous cases to ever test the spirit of a man trying to find peace in a land still very much at war with itself. The Arizona Territory in 1878 was a place of stark contrasts and simmering tensions. Sun-baked mesas stretched into infinity, punctuated by the jagged peaks of the Dragoon Mountains, a natural fortress that had long served as a stronghold for Apache bands. To the east, the fledgling settlement of Oakhaven clung precariously to existence, a collection of dusty wooden buildings huddled around a single, struggling general store and a saloon that saw more action than the local church. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and dust, and the ever-present threat of Apache raids or outlaw ambushes hung heavy, a constant reminder that civilization here was a fragile veneer. The land itself was a character, harsh and beautiful, demanding respect and offering little in return but the promise of freedom to those brave or foolish enough to seek it. Jedediah "Jed" Stone was one of those men. At 42 years old, his face was a roadmap of the West sun-creased skin, eyes the color of a distant storm, and a jawline set hard by years of solitude and hardship. He wasn't a talker, preferring the company of his mule, Old Bess, and the silence of the canyons to the clamor of men. Once a respected scout for the U.S. Cavalry, Jed had seen too much bloodshed, too many broken treaties, and too many good men die. Had traded his uniform for a prospector's pick and a life of digging for silver and gold, hoping the earth's bounty might bury the ghosts that rode with him. His most peculiar habit, one that drew curious glances and hushed whispers in the few towns he passed through, was the way he carried his Colt .45. Unlike every other man in the territory, Jed's gun was never holstered with the barrel pointing down, ready for a quick draw. Instead, it rested in a custom-made holster, the barrel always pointing skyward, a silent, almost defiant gesture against the violence that defined the frontier. This quirk, more than his quiet demeanor or his skill with a rifle, was what made him an enigma. The circumstances that led to his fateful encounter began with a streak of bad luck. A flash flood in a remote canyon had washed away his last promising claim, leaving him with little more than his mule, his gear, and a dwindling supply of rations. Forced to seek supplies, he was making his way towards Oakhaven, a journey that would take him through a particularly desolate stretch of the Dragoon foothills. It was there, amidst the scrub brush and sun-baked rocks, that he stumbled upon a scene that would irrevocably alter his solitary path. A small Apache camp, clearly abandoned in haste, lay ransacked. A single, fresh trail led away from it, not of a raiding party, but of a lone individual, moving with purpose, but also with a hint of desperation. Jed, with his scout's instincts, knew trouble when he saw it. And trouble, in this land, often meant a choice between turning a blind eye or stepping into a storm. For Jedediah Stone, turning a blind eye had never been an option, not when a life might be at stake. Jed followed the trail for nearly 5 miles, his eyes scanning the ground for disturbed pebbles, broken twigs, and the subtle impressions of moccasins. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the scent of pine and dust into the air. He moved with the quiet grace of a predator, his old Winchester rifle held loosely in his hand, ready but not eager. He found her by a small, hidden spring, a trickle of life in the parched landscape. She was young, perhaps 25, with long, braided black hair that shimmered like raven's wings and eyes that held the depth of ancient canyons. Her buckskin dress was torn, and a deep gash marred her left arm, crudely bandaged with a strip of cloth. She was trying to draw water, but her movements were slow, pained. Her name was Ayanna, and she was Apache. As Jed approached, she stiffened, her hand instinctively going to a small, bone-handled knife tucked into her belt. Her gaze was wary, but not fearful. "You follow," she stated, her English surprisingly clear, though accented. Jed raised his hands, palms open, a gesture of peace. "No harm," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Saw your camp. Looked like trouble." Ayanna studied him, her eyes lingering on his Colt .45, its barrel pointing towards the sky. The sight was so unusual, so contrary to every warrior and white man she had ever encountered, that it momentarily disarmed her. "Cowboy," she finally asked, her voice a soft, melodic question, "why is your gun always pointing up?" The question hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation. Jed hesitated, a flicker of old pain in his eyes. "It's a long story, ma'am," he replied, his gaze meeting hers. "You're hurt." Before she could answer, a rustle in the nearby brush announced the arrival of another. A grizzled, heavily armed man emerged, his face scarred and his eyes cold. This was Silas, the Serpent Thorn, a notorious bounty hunter and land speculator, known for his ruthlessness and his particular hatred for Native Americans. He was accompanied by two equally unsavory henchmen, Pike and Grub. Well, what do we have here?" Thorn sneered, his gaze sweeping from Ayanna to Jed. "Looks like I found my runaway. And you, old man, are either a fool or her accomplice." Jed knew Thorn's reputation. He was a man who preferred to shoot first and ask questions never. "She's hurt, Thorn. Leave her be." Thorn laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "She's worth a pretty penny, dead or alive. And you're in my way." He drew his own pistol, its barrel glinting menacingly. Jed's hand moved, not to his upward-pointing Colt, but to the Winchester he still held. The click of the lever action was loud in the sudden silence. "I said, leave her be." A tense standoff ensued. Thorn, surprised by Jed's calm defiance, hesitated. He knew Jedediah Stone by reputation too, a former scout who could shoot the eye out of a fly at 50 paces. But Jed's gun was pointing up, a strange, almost comical sight. "You ain't gonna draw that fast, old man," Thorn challenged, trying to regain his nerve. "Maybe not," Jed replied, "but this Winchester's already pointed at your gut." Ayanna, seeing the tension, spoke quickly. "They took my brother. They raided our camp. They seek a map." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "Shut your mouth, squaw. There's no map. Just a bounty for you and your kin." Jed knew Ayanna was telling the truth. The ransacked camp, the urgency of her flight. "What map?" he asked, his voice low. "A map to the lost Apache gold," Thorn snarled, revealing his true motive. "Her people are said to guard it. She knows where it is." Jed looked at Ayanna, then back at Thorn. He had heard the legends of the lost Apache gold, a fabled treasure hidden deep within the mountains. Many had died trying to find it. "There's no gold, Thorn. Just a legend." "We'll see about that," Thorn said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Now, step aside, or you'll be joining her in the ground." Jed knew he couldn't let Thorn take Ayanna. Not with her injured, and not with the look of desperation in her eyes. He had to act. He had to make a decision that would pull him back into the very kind of conflict he had tried to escape. He would protect her, and in doing so, he would begin a journey that would force him to confront his past and the meaning behind his upward-pointing gun. The standoff broke with a sudden, violent flurry. Jed, anticipating Thorne's move, fired his Winchester, not at Thorne, but at the ground near Pike's feet, kicking up a cloud of dust and sending the henchman stumbling. In the confusion, Jed grabbed Ayanna, pulling her behind a cluster of rocks. Thorne and Grub returned fire, bullets ricocheting off the stone. "Run!" Jed yelled, pushing Ayanna deeper into the brush. "I'll cover you." Ayanna, despite her injury, moved with surprising agility, disappearing into the rugged terrain. Jed laid down suppressing fire, forcing Thorne and his men to take cover. He knew he couldn't hold them off forever, but he bought Ayanna precious time. When he saw his chance, he retreated, melting into the landscape he knew so well, circling around to meet Ayanna further along the trail. They rendezvoused at a hidden cave Jed knew, a cool, dark refuge from the relentless sun. Ayanna, though grateful, was still wary. "You risk much for a stranger," she observed, tending to her wound with herbs she gathered from the cave entrance. "You're no stranger now," Jed replied, checking his rifle. "And Thorne ain't a man to leave loose ends. He'll be after us both." He then asked, "Tell me about this map, and your brother." Ayanna explained that her younger brother, Keto, had been captured by Thorne's men during the raid. They believed Keto knew the location of a sacred Apache site, not a gold mine, but a place of spiritual power, marked on an ancient map passed down through her family. Thorne, misinterpreting the legends, believed it led to a vast fortune. "The map is not of gold," Ayanna insisted. "It is of our history, our spirit. Keto would never betray it." Jed listened, his mind piecing together the fragments. He knew the Apache held certain places sacred, places of power and healing. He also knew the greed of men like Thorne. "We need to get your brother back," he stated. "And stop Thorne from desecrating whatever he's looking for." Their journey began, a perilous trek through the Dragoon Mountains. Jed, with his unparalleled tracking skills, led the way, navigating treacherous canyons and hidden passes. Ayanna, despite her wound, proved to be an invaluable companion, her knowledge of the land, its plants, and its subtle signs complementing Jed's frontier wisdom. They spoke little, but a silent understanding began to grow between them. One evening, as they rested by a small fire, Ayanna again fixed her gaze on his upward-pointing gun. "Still, you do not answer," she pressed gently. "Why does your gun look to the sky?" Jed sighed, a long, weary sound. "It's a reminder," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "A reminder of a promise. Years ago, during the Apache Wars, I was a scout. We were tracking a band, and I made a mistake. I fired too soon. A young Apache boy, no older than Keto, was caught in the crossfire. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a child." Jed paused, the memory clearly painful. "His mother, she looked at me, not with hatred, but with a sorrow that cut deeper than any bullet. She said, 'May your gun always point to the sky, white man, so it may never again bring sorrow to the earth.' I took her words to heart. I fashioned this holster. It slows my draw, yes, but it forces me to think. To remember. To aim for peace, not just for death." Ayanna listened, her expression unreadable. She understood the weight of such a promise, the burden of a life taken. "It is a heavy burden," she finally said. but an honorable one. Their journey was fraught with danger. They narrowly avoided a patrol of U.S. cavalry, who would have seen Ayanna as a hostile and Jed as an accomplice. They outwitted a hungry mountain lion and navigated a sudden rockslide. Each challenge forged a stronger bond between them, a mutual respect born of shared peril. They eventually reached the outskirts of a small, forgotten mining town called Whisper Gulch, a ghost of its former self, now mostly abandoned. Jed suspected Thorn might be using it as a temporary base, given its remote location and proximity to the mountains. As they approached, they saw fresh tracks of Thorn's men. They were close. Inside Whisper Gulch, they found evidence that Thorn had indeed set up a makeshift camp in the old assay office. Jed and Ayanna observed from a distance, hidden in the shadows of the decaying buildings. They saw Keto, bound and guarded, looking thin but defiant. Thorn was there, along with Pike and Grub, and two new, rougher-looking men. Thorn was clearly frustrated. "The boy won't talk," he roared, slamming his fist on a rickety table. "He just keeps muttering about spirit paths and ancestors' light. Where's the damn gold, you little savage?" Keto, despite his fear, remained silent, his eyes burning with a quiet fury. Ayanna's heart ached for her brother. "We must get him," she whispered to Jed. "Before Thorn breaks him." Jed nodded, his gaze fixed on the assay office. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Thorn had more men, and they were armed. But Jed also knew the layout of these old mining towns, the hidden passages, the forgotten tunnels. He had a plan, one that would rely on stealth, surprise, and the unexpected wisdom of an Apache woman. The journey was far from over, the true test lay ahead, in the heart of Whisper Gulch, where the fate of Keto, the sacred map, and Jed's own redemption would be decided. Jed and Ayanna spent the next day observing Thorn's movements in Whisper Gulch. The town was a skeletal remains of a boom-and-bust cycle, with empty storefronts and collapsing shacks providing ample cover. Thorn's men were sloppy, overconfident in their remote location. They drank heavily, gambled, and took turns guarding Keto, who was kept in a small, reinforced room at the back of the assay office. "They are careless," Ayanna noted, her eyes sharp. "But many careless men make mistakes," Jed replied, cleaning his Winchester. "We'll use their carelessness against them." Their plan was simple but risky. Under the cover of darkness, Ayanna would create a diversion on one side of the town, drawing the attention of Thorn's men. While they were distracted, Jed would use an old, partially collapsed tunnel system that led beneath the assay office to reach Keto. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ayanna moved like a ghost through the shadows, her moccasins making no sound. She gathered dry brush and strategically placed it near the old livery stable, far enough from the assay office to avoid immediate detection but close enough for the smoke to be seen. Jed, meanwhile, slipped into the mouth of the old mine shaft he'd discovered, the air inside cool and damp, smelling of earth and forgotten dreams. Ayanna lit the brush, and within minutes, a plume of smoke rose into the twilight sky. A shout went up from Thorn's men. "Fire! Over by the stable!" Thorn, cursing, dispatched Pike and Grub to investigate, keeping only 2 men with him to guard Keto. This was Jed's window. He navigated the dark, claustrophobic tunnel, his senses heightened, the sound of his own breathing echoing in his ears. He emerged into a small storage cellar beneath the assay office, directly below Keto's room. A quick inspection revealed a loose floorboard. With a grunt, Jed pried it open, revealing a narrow opening. He climbed into the room, his Winchester ready. Keto, startled, looked up, his eyes wide. The two guards, caught off guard, fumbled for their weapons. Jed moved with a speed that belied his age, his rifle but connecting with the jaw of one guard, sending him sprawling. The other guard managed to draw his pistol, but Jed's Colt .45, drawn from its upward-pointing holster, was surprisingly quick. He fired, not at the man, but at the oil lamp hanging above, plunging the room into semi-darkness as the glass shattered and oil spilled. In the confusion, Jed cut Keto's bonds. "We need to go," he whispered. "Now." As they made their way back through the tunnel, the sounds of shouting and gunfire erupted from above. Thorn had realized he'd been tricked. "They're in the assay office. Get them." Jed, Keto, and Ayanna emerged from the mine shaft just as Thorn and his remaining men converged on the assay office. They were trapped between Thorn's group and Pike and Grubb, who were returning from the stable. "Damn it!" Thorn roared. "They're trying to flank us." A desperate chase ensued through the decaying streets of Whisper Gulch. Jed, with Keto by his side, exchanged fire with Thorn's men, while Ayanna, using her knowledge of the terrain, led them through hidden alleys and crumbling buildings. Keto, though young, was brave, following Jed's instructions without hesitation. During a brief lull in the chase, as they hid behind the remains of a blacksmith's shop, Keto pulled a small, intricately carved wooden box from inside his shirt. "This is it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The map. It is not on paper. It is in the carvings." Jed examined the box. It was a puzzle, a series of interlocking pieces that, when arranged correctly, would reveal a pattern. "Thorn wants this," Jed realized. "He thinks it's a treasure map." "It is a map," Ayanna corrected, "but not for gold. It shows the path to the Whispering Stones, a place where our ancestors spoke to the spirits. A place of healing and prophecy." Suddenly, Thorn's voice boomed from nearby. "Jedediah Stone. You can't hide forever. Give me the boy and the map, and maybe I'll let you walk away." Jed knew Thorn wouldn't keep his word. He never did. "We need to get out of here," Jed said, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The only way out was through a narrow canyon pass, a natural choke point. As they made their dash for the canyon, Thorn and his men opened fire. Jed returned fire, covering Ayanna and Keto. A bullet grazed Jed's arm, but he ignored the pain. They reached the mouth of the canyon, a winding, rocky path that offered some protection but also limited escape routes. Inside the canyon, they found an unexpected ally. A grizzled old prospector named Bold Man Fitzwilliam, who had been working a small, forgotten claim, emerged from his dugout, rifle in hand. Fitzwilliam was a cantankerous hermit, but he had a grudging respect for Jed, who had once saved him from a rattlesnake bite. "What in tarnation is going on, Jed?" Fitzwilliam grumbled, but his rifle was aimed squarely at the canyon entrance. "Thorn and his men," Jed explained quickly. "They're after this boy and a sacred Apache artifact." Fitzwilliam spat tobacco juice. "Thorn. That snake. Ain't no good comes from him. I'll help ya, Jed. Always hated that man." With Fitzwilliam's unexpected assistance, they managed to hold off Thorn's initial assault. The canyon walls echoed with gunfire. Jed knew this was a temporary reprieve. Thorn would regroup and find another way. The stakes were higher now. Not just Keto's freedom, but the protection of a sacred Apache site, and perhaps, the fragile peace between two worlds. The truth behind the Whispering Stones, and the true meaning of the map were about to be revealed, and Jed's upward-pointing gun would soon face its ultimate test. The canyon became a crucible. Thorn, enraged by Jed's defiance and the loss of his men, pressed his attack with renewed ferocity. He knew Jed and his companions were trapped, and he intended to wear them down. Fitzwilliam, despite his age, proved to be a surprisingly effective marksman, his old Sharps rifle picking off Thorn's men with methodical precision. Ayanna and Keto, hidden behind a large boulder, helped Jed reload and kept watch. "They won't give up," Ayanna stated, her voice grim. "Thorn wants the map, and he wants Keto." "And he won't get either," Jed vowed, his eyes scanning the canyon rim. He knew Thorn would try to flank them, to find a way above them. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, distorted shadows across the canyon, Thorn made his move. While Pike and Grub kept up a steady barrage of fire at the canyon mouth, Thorn himself, along with his two remaining henchmen, began scaling the less steep side of the canyon, aiming to get above Jed's position. Jed spotted them. "They're going high," he yelled, pointing. "Fitzwilliam, keep them pinned down at the mouth. Ayanna, Keto, with me." Jed, Ayanna, and Keto scrambled up the rocky slope, trying to intercept Thorn. The climb was arduous, the loose scree threatening to give way with every step. Jed's grazed arm throbbed, but adrenaline pushed him forward. They reached a small plateau just as Thorn and his men crested the ridge. A tense silence fell, broken only by the distant crackle of Fitzwilliam's rifle. Thorn grinned, a cruel, triumphant sneer. "Nowhere to run, old man. Give me the map, and the boy." "It's not gold you're after, Thorn," Jed said, his voice steady. "It's a sacred place. You'll defile it." "Sacred? Ha! It's just dirt and rocks to me," Thorn scoffed. "But if there's a legend, there's a reason. And that reason is usually gold." He gestured to his men. "Get them." A fierce skirmish erupted. Jed, using the terrain to his advantage, fought with a controlled fury, his Winchester barking. Ayanna, armed with her knife and a surprising agility, moved like a shadow, distracting Thorn's men, forcing them to divide their attention. Keto, though unarmed, threw rocks and shouted, doing his part to confuse the attackers. During the chaos, one of Thorn's men managed to get behind Jed, raising his pistol. Ayanna, seeing the danger, lunged, tackling the man and sending his shot wide. But in the struggle, her knife was knocked away, and the man overpowered her, pinning her to the ground. "Ayanna!" Keto cried, rushing forward. "Stay back, Keto!" Jed roared, but it was too late. Thorn, seeing his chance, grabbed Keto, holding his own pistol to the boy's head. "Drop your weapon, Stone. Or the boy dies." Jed froze, his Winchester aimed at Thorn, but unable to fire without risking Keto. The upward-pointing Colt remained in its holster, a silent testament to his promise. "The map, old man," Thorn demanded, pressing the barrel harder against Keto's temple. "Give it to me." Keto, terrified but resolute, looked at Jed. "Do not give it to him, Jedediah. It is our heritage." Jed's heart ached. He had promised to protect them, and now he was caught in an impossible choice. He looked at Ayanna, struggling against her captor, her eyes pleading. He looked at Keto, a brave boy facing death. And he looked at his upward-pointing gun, a symbol of peace, now seemingly useless in the face of such brutality. Then, Ayanna, with a burst of strength, headbutted her captor, momentarily stunning him. She scrambled free, grabbing her knife. "The map is not for you, Thorn," she shouted. "It is for those who respect the land." Thorn, distracted by Ayana's sudden move, momentarily loosened his grip on Keto. In that split second, Jed made his decision. He wouldn't sacrifice Keto, but he wouldn't give Thorn the map either. He would use the very thing that made his gun unique. With a lightning-fast motion, Jed drew his Colt .45 from its upward-pointing holster. The unusual draw, instead of coming from the hip, was an upward sweep, bringing the barrel down in a swift, arcing motion. He didn't aim at Thorn, but at the ground directly in front of him, kicking up a blinding spray of dust and pebbles. Thorn flinched, his eyes momentarily squeezed shut. In that instant, Keto twisted free, scrambling away. Jed, now with his Colt aimed, fired a warning shot past Thorn's ear. "It's over, Thorn," he bellowed. "You lose." Thorn, disoriented and outmaneuvered, looked around. His men were either incapacitated or fleeing. Fitzwilliam's rifle continued to bark from the canyon mouth, driving back Pike and Grub. Thorn was alone, facing Jed, Ayana, and Keto, all united against him. His face contorted in a snarl of defeat and rage. He fired a wild shot at Jed, then turned and fled, disappearing over the ridge, a coward in the face of true courage. Jed, breathing heavily, lowered his Colt. Ayana rushed to Keto, embracing him tightly. "You are safe, little brother," she whispered. Keto, still shaken, looked at Jed with awe. "Your gun," it pointed up, then down. It was fast. Jed managed a small, weary smile. "It's not about how fast you draw, son. It's about why you draw." The immediate danger was over, but the journey to the Whispering Stones remained. The confrontation had revealed the depths of Thorn's greed and the strength of the bond forged between Jed and the Apache siblings. The upward-pointing gun, once a symbol of a past mistake, had become an instrument of protection, a testament to a promise kept, and a new path forward. With Thorn routed and his remaining men scattered, the canyon fell silent, save for the distant calls of night birds. Fitzwilliam emerged from the canyon mouth, grumbling about "damn varmints," but with a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good riddance to that snake," he declared, spitting. "Now, what's all this about a map?" Ayana, with Keto by her side, carefully opened the wooden box. Inside, the intricate carvings on the interlocking pieces began to glow faintly in the fading light. Keto, with Ayana's guidance, began to arrange the pieces, his small fingers deftly fitting them together. As the last piece clicked into place, the carvings formed a clear, three-dimensional representation of the surrounding mountains, with a distinct path marked by a series of symbols. "This is the path to the Whispering Stones," Ayana explained, her voice filled with reverence. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin. Our ancestors would go there to seek guidance, to heal, to connect with the spirits of the land." Jed looked at the map, then at the mountains. He had explored these ranges for years, but he had never seen this path, never known of this place. It was a testament to the Apache's deep connection to the land, a knowledge hidden from the eyes of outsiders. The next morning, after a night of much-needed rest and a shared meal, Jed, Ayana, Keto, and even Fitzwilliam, who had become surprisingly invested in the outcome, set out for the Whispering Stones. The journey was short but steep, leading them to a secluded valley high in the Dragoon Mountains, a place untouched by the harshness of the outside world. There, nestled among ancient pines and towering rock formations, stood a circle of massive, smooth stones, worn by centuries of wind and rain. The air around them hummed with a palpable energy, a sense of peace and profound antiquity. As they approached, a soft, almost imperceptible hum seemed to emanate from the stones, a sound that resonated deep within the soul. Ayana and Keto walked to the center of the circle, their heads bowed in respect. Ayana placed the wooden map box on a flat stone, then began to chant softly in her native tongue, a melodic, ancient song that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the valley. Keto joined her, his young voice clear and pure. Jed and Fitzwilliam stood respectfully at the edge of the circle, observing. Jed felt a profound sense of awe, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his youth. This was not a place of gold or earthly riches, but a treasure far more valuable, a sanctuary for the spirit, a connection to something eternal. After a time, Ayana and Keto finished their chant. Ayana turned to Jed, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Jedediah Stone," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have protected our sacred place, and you have returned my brother to me." "It was the right thing to do, Ayana," Jed replied, a rare smile touching his lips. "And I learned something too." Fitzwilliam, ever the pragmatist, scratched his beard. "Well, ain't no gold, but it's a mighty fine view. And a powerful quiet place." Jed knew his path was still solitary, but it was no longer haunted. The promise he had made years ago, symbolized by his upward-pointing gun, had been honored in a way he never expected. He had aimed for peace, and in doing so, he had found a measure of it for himself. He had protected not just a life, but a legacy, a culture, and a sacred connection to the land. Ayana and Keto decided to stay at the Whispering Stones for a time, to perform ceremonies and reconnect with their heritage. Jed, after ensuring their safety, prepared to continue his journey. As he mounted Old Bess, Ayana approached him one last time. "Your gun," she said, her eyes meeting his. "It points up, but it also protects. It is a good path you walk, Jedediah Stone." Jed nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. He rode off, leaving the peaceful valley behind, but carrying with him a renewed sense of purpose. He would continue to prospect, to live his solitary life, but he would do so with a lighter heart, knowing that his gun, though always pointing up, could still be drawn to defend the innocent and protect the sacred. The frontier was still a dangerous place, but Jedediah Stone, the cowboy with the upward-pointing gun, was ready for whatever it might bring. And so concludes the tale of Jedediah Stone and Ayana, a story of courage, cultural understanding, and the unexpected paths to redemption in the untamed Arizona territory. Dear listeners of Gunpowder Legends, I hope this tale kept you on the edge of your saddle. If this story of the Old West resonated with you, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the Gunpowder Legends channel, where every week we bring you the most remarkable and thrilling stories from the American frontier. Remember that all the stories we tell here on Gunpowder Legends are works of fiction, though some may be inspired by real events or frontier legends. Our goal is to entertain you and make you experience the spirit and emotion of the untamed West from the comfort of your home. Until next time, and may your trails be safe. See you in the next episode of Gunpowder Legends.